Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you could join us today for our 2025 Global Regulatory Roundup. I'm Gay Esser, the Marketing Manager here at RegDesk. And if you don't know what we do, we're an AI-powered regulatory information management platform with built-in regulatory intelligence. Our platform allows RA teams to leverage AI so you can prepare, manage, and publish international submissions smarter and faster. To focus on you for a minute, we just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. We will go over the last 5 to 10 minutes with Q&A, so be sure to drop anything that you have that you want to ask while we're going through the webinar into the Q&A or chat, and we'll pull that at the end and save those last 5 to 10 minutes for that. And then also we will share the slide deck and the recording and any unanswered questions with you over the next few days, so be on the lookout for that. Now, let me take a moment to introduce our esteemed experts. We have the privilege of having Jodi Granger, our Director of Regulatory Affairs, joining us on the webinar today. She'll facilitate some stuff and help with the Q&A. And then we have other experts and special guests, Kartika Puri, our Regional Data QA Lead from Asia Pacific. We have Apurva Kushare, our Regional Data QA Lead from North America and Europe. Claudia Meyer, our Regional Data QA Lead from Latin America, and Baraa Nofal, our Regional Data QA Lead from the Middle East and Africa. Welcome to each of you, and thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you putting together all this information. We know that it can be overwhelming for people to try to gather all this regulatory intelligence, and you guys do such a great job helping us with that. I'm going to turn it over to you now, Jodi, and let you go ahead and get started.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. This is our year-end webinar, and we thought it would be great to kind of do a global roundup of key things that have happened in terms of regulatory intelligence announcements throughout all of our regions. It's important to note that we're not going to go through every single alert or update that has happened within these regions. We're only going to give you some high-level things that we thought would be beneficial to ensure you are aware of. I am so pleased to have my whole team here. Each of the leads that will be presenting to you today manage a diverse group of regulatory professionals in their regions. Our regulatory intelligence is human curated, so we are not an AI-based regulatory intelligence team. All of our regulatory professionals in each region diligently, every day, all day, what they do is read the laws, read the updates from regulators, interact with the health authorities if there are questions, and then they populate that regulatory intelligence into our platform. In addition to pushing alerts so that all of our clients are aware in real time what's changing in the marketplace. So I'm very happy to have them here representing their regions, and I think that you'll find the information that they present to you will be very valuable. So we'll go through, as the agenda states, each region independently, starting with Asia Pacific, then we'll move on to North America and Europe, followed by Latin America and Middle East and Africa. And we'll try to save time at the end, as Gay mentioned, for Q&A. So with that in mind, I will turn it over to Kartika, who will join us in speaking about Asia Pacific.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As we approach the end of 2025, it's clear that Asia has seen some of the most dynamic regulatory developments globally in the medical device space. Regulators across the region have been focused on three core priorities: faster access to innovation, technologies, stronger post-market control, and clearer regulatory expectation, particularly in the software, AI, and high-risk devices. Over the next 10 minutes, I'll walk you through the key regional trends I have observed, followed by the most impactful regulatory updates issued across the major Asian markets in 2025. And importantly, what these changes mean from the compliance and market access perspective. So let's begin with the key regional level changes that set the overall regulatory direction in Asia this year. Starting with Singapore, The Health Sciences Authority introduced clearer and more structured pathway under its special access route, specifically for the unregistered medical devices. These updates aim to balance the patient access with the regulatory oversight, particularly for the device intended for the emergency use, compassionate use, or limited clinical needs. At the same time, Singapore strengthened the licensing requirement for the manufacturer, importers, and wholesaler. This reflects the broader shift towards the supply chain accountability, ensuring that the economic operator clearly understand their regulatory responsibilities. Additionally, HSA redefined its product registration guidance, offering more detailed expectation around the documentational quality, evaluation criteria, and submission readiness, which ultimately helps reduces the review cycle and avoid deficiencies. Moving to Sri Lanka, the authorities launched the unified dossier format for the medical device application. This is significant operational improvement as it standardizes submission structure and reduces ambiguity for applicants. Sri Lanka also implemented reliance-based review mechanism, allowing faster approval for the device already authorized by the recognized preference authorities. This change aligns Sri Lanka with the global regulatory best practices and significantly shortened time to market for established products. In Kazakhstan, regulator initiated the plan for the single window digital registration system. This marks an important step towards the digital transformation, enabling centralized submission, review, and communication through a single platform. While still it's in a pilot phase, the system is expected to reduce the administrative burden and improve the transparency once fully implemented. Finally, in South Korea, the Administration of Food and Drug Safety focused heavily on the post market controls and life cycle management. Korea standardized procedure and timelines for the government initiated medical device recalls, giving manufacturer clear expectation around response obligation. The MFSD also clarified license renewal requirements, including the documentation expectation and validity period, an important update for companies managing long-term portfolios in Korea. Overall, these region change show a clearer trend towards the greater clarity, reliance on trusted regulators, and stronger life cycle oversight. Moving to the next slide. Now let's look at, Judy, can you? Yeah, thank you. Now let's look at some of the key regulatory updates issues during 2025, starting with South Korea and Australia. In South Korea, the MSFDS launches a new investigational system for implanted medical devices, significantly strengthening post-marketing surveillance. The system enhances traceability, adverse event investigation, and correctional action monitoring, particularly important for high-risk and long-term implant products. Korea has also made global headlines by releasing the AI medical device approval guidelines, becoming one of the first regulator worldwide to formalize regulatory expectation specifically for AI-based medical devices. These guidelines address algorithm validation, data management, performance monitoring, and change management, setting a clear compliance framework for AI developers. In Australia, the Therapeutic Goods Administration issued several important clarifications. These include updated guidance on application audit rules, helping sponsor better understand when and why audits are triggered. Australia also expanded guidance on use of overseas market authorization evidence, allowing sponsors to leverage approvals from comparable regulatory more effectively. Additional Australia clarified requirements for medical device containing medicinal, microbial, recombinant, or animal origin substance, an important update for combination product and biologically derived devices. In Malaysia, they introduced a circular that has information regarding the conformity assessment pathway using the overseas approval. This reinforces Malaysia's commitment to reliance-based regulatory pathway and reducing duplicate reviews. South Korea continues its focus on digital health by publishing international common guidelines for machine learning medical device development, followed by the medical device cybersecurity guidelines. These documents emphasize secure software development, risk management, and post market cybersecurity vigilance. Moving to the next slide. Continuing with the remaining updates from 2025, South Korea issues a new regulation on unique device identification management, strengthening its traceability requirements across the device lifecycle and aligning with Korea more closely with global UDI framework. In Israel, regulators introduced a new procedure for changing registration in the medical device equipment register, providing clearer rules for the post approval changes and administrative updates. Japan implemented partial amendment to the PDA Act affecting regulator requirements for medical devices and pharmaceuticals. These amendments reinforce quality, safety, and life cycle compliance obligation. In Singapore, HSA issued GN21 guidance, which is on change notification for registered medical devices, clarifying when notification versus the new application are required. Another guidance which they have released is GN22 guidance. Further, it clarifies dealer obligation for Class A devices that are exempted from product registration, addressing a long-standing compliance gap. In Taiwan, updated guidance addresses AI and machine learning technologies, medical devices, with stronger expectation around the training data, clinical performance, and algorithm transparency. Finally, Hong Kong updated its guidance for software devices and cybersecurity, reinforcing risk management, data protection, and software lifecycle controls. To summarize, 2025 has been a transformative year for medical devices regulation across Asia. Regulators have placed stronger emphasis on the AI software oversight, cybersecurity, reliance pathway, and digital system and post-market accountability. For manufacturer stakeholders, these changes highlights the importance of proactive regulatory planning, early compliance alignment, and continuous monitoring of regulatory developments. Thank you, everyone. Now I will hand over the slides deck to Jodi.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move to North America and Europe, where Kartika is going to present, or I'm sorry, Apurva is going to present the updates for these regions.
Thank you, Jodi, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. I will highlight some of the most important regulatory developments from North America and Europe region that are shaping the medical device and IVD landscape. I have classified these important alerts under some major themes or trends that we have come across in the year 2025. The first theme that we can see is clinical investigations. The regulators are clearly focusing on earlier engagement and stronger oversight. The first alert is about EU. EMA has, in collaboration with the European Commission, established a regular procedure for scientific advice on certain high-risk medical devices. Manufacturers of Class 3 devices and Class 2B active devices intended to administer or remove medicines can now submit their request for advice via a portal and consult the medical device expert panels at different stages of the clinical development. The next important noteworthy alert is from UK. UK has updated a guidance which is issued on clinical investigations as well for medical devices. Then moving on to the next important alert is from Denmark. Denmark has released a new requirements introduced for the approval of significant changes in clinical trials. So, what this alert is about, it's basically if a sponsorer wishes to introduce changes to a clinical trial that may have a significant impact on the safety, health, or rights of the trial subjects, or on the robustness or reliability of the clinical data generated in connection with the trial, then the Danish Medicines Agency must grant permission for the changes before the changes can be implemented. So the agency has about 38 days to process an application for a change. And also, the Research Ethics Committee must have completed its assessment of the change before the agency can make its decision. So that is also an important aspect on the ethics committee end. And also, the sponsor must submit updated versions of the relevant documentation where the changes must be clearly identifiable. So, moving on to the second theme, it relates to the IVD classification and regulatory clarity. So, EU has released a guidance clarifying classification rules for IVDs under regulation the 2017-746. Then we also have another IVD guidance document that has been released by Spain. It's a new royal decree regulating the in vitro diagnostic medical devices. So, this text follows the line of the European regulation with regard to the health protection, transparency, and the promotion of innovation. Lastly, cybersecurity and digital safety continue to be a top regulatory priority. So UK has released cybersecurity codes of practice with setting like baseline security requirements for connected products. So the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology has developed codes of practice to set clear expectations for cyber security. Also, the voluntary codes use principles to set out the recommended baseline response to give to a given set of cybersecurity risks. So another important alert is from the US FDA. So US FDA also issued a cybersecurity guidance covering quality system and pre-market submissions. So, this document provides FDA's recommendations to industry regarding cybersecurity device design, labeling, and also the documentation that FDA recommends be included in the pre-market submissions for devices with cybersecurity risks. We also have another guidance document on cybersecurity released by Liechtenstein. So they have published a national cybersecurity strategy updated to strengthen protection against any cyber risks. So as you can see, there's a lot of action happening around cybersecurity is becoming like a top priority, and also it's becoming a main hot topic in the regulatory world currently. So moving on to the next slide. Uh, yeah, so we have some additional regulatory themes that I would like to highlight, and we have observed throughout this year, and also they continue to influence the compliance strategies across North America and Europe. So the first theme is software, digital submissions, and quality systems. So the regulators are accelerating the shift toward digital regulatory interactions and modernized quality oversight. So, with this consideration, UK has released a guidance on manufacturers' online reporting environment, which is called as MORE. So, the manufacturers' online reporting environment, it's basically a digital platform designed to facilitate the reporting, monitoring, and management of medical device incidents. So this is something it's new that the UK has released, and it's basically an online platform, a digital platform, and it's a great initiative by the UK agency. Then moving on to the next alert, it's by US FDA. So FDA has expanded their E-Star program for de novo submissions as well. So as of October 1st, 2025, all the de novo submissions must be submitted as electronic submissions using E-Star. So just make an important note of this alert. And also, FDA has, in addition, released a guidance clarifying computer software assurance expectations for production and quality systems. So, FDA has issued this guidance to provide recommendations on computer software assurance for computers and automated data processing systems used as part of the medical device production or the quality system. So the second theme basically focuses on labeling, UDI, and advertising, where regulators are reinforcing traceability and responsible communication. So Finland released a new UDI marking requirements for medical devices, which went into effect in May 2025. So beginning May 2025, all Class 1 medical devices and Class B and C in vitro diagnostic medical devices must carry a UDI on their packaging. So, for devices in higher risk categories such as medical devices class 2A, 2B, and 3, and also the IVD class D, a UDI has already been required on the packaging label. So there's another guidance issued in Italy. So Italy has issued new guideline on advertising of medical devices, IVDs, and surgical devices. So the links to all of these alerts have been provided in this table here. So you can click on the link and just go through the details of these guidance documents. So finally, the environmental and sustainability requirements are also becoming increasingly prominent. So UK has updated regulations reinforcing obligations under waste, electrical and electronic equipment rules. So the regulations basically cover the electrical and electronic equipment, which are defined in 15 broad categories. So again, the details can be found in the link of the guidance document. So, in addition to all of these important alerts, I would also like to share one bonus alert, and that is from Switzerland. So, Swissmedic has adopted the new EU requirements for the electronic provision of instructions for use for medical devices with immediate effect. So, this alert was released on August 8, 2025, and Swissmedic adopted this requirements allowing electronic instructions for use intended for professional users in Switzerland. So moving on to the next slide. So here we have a breaking news from European Commission. I know like this news is across all the European region. So it's about the UDAMED 4 first modules. So these modules will be mandatory to use as of 28th of May 2026. So the first four UDAMED modules will be mandatory to use, and they are the actor registration, the UDI slash devices registration, notified bodies and certificates, and also market surveillance. So this is a big news coming from European Commission. And also, I would like to make a note. We are doing a deep dive webinar in January with DQS, especially on UDAMED. So just keep an eye out on this webinar, and I hope it'll provide you more insights on what are some changes happening with the UDAMED. So these are some key alerts that I wanted to share. And here I have listed down all the important alerts that we just discussed. And you can just go through each and every document. So just to conclude, based on the alerts that we have discussed, it clearly reflects a shared direction in global medical device oversight. So regulators are placing great emphasis on like early engagement and also robust clinical evidence. Also, they have like clearer classification and market access pathways. They are also trying to strengthen cybersecurity and digital resilience, and increased expectations for digital submissions, transparency, and sustainability. So I hope this presentation was helpful, and now I will hand it over to Claudia for some LATAM updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Apurva. Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today. So let's talk about regarding strategic regulatory advances in Latin America. And we can highlight the following ones. So first, regarding traceability processes, Brazil and Chile made some advances. Brazil has been moving forward with UDI implementation. Since July, Class 4 manufacturers are required to place the UDI code on labels. And Chile published a technical standard about patient safety through the implementation of a medical device traceability system. So this technical standard updates the 226/2022 standard. When we talk about law modernization, here are some highlights. CUBA published a regulation updating its regulatory framework aligned with the IMTF and World Health Organization. They published the regulation E132/25, which marks the transition from a product-centered regulatory model to one focused on the product life cycle, risk, and evidence-based, aligning Cuba with international best practices. And it was also a year for many updates for El Salvador, since they worked extensively to update its regulatory documentation. Brazil is making advances in the classification of borderline products through the opening of a public consultation, and also worked actively on improving the importation process. Maybe this was the Anvisa's most significant effort in 2025. Ecuador and Honduras aligned with the IMTRF and published update guidelines on product classification in both countries. And regarding GMP regulation, we had new regulations published for Mexico and Chile. And we also observed that the region is gradually adopting or improving the use of electronic submissions, as seen in Nicaragua, Colombia, Honduras, and Guatemala. When we discuss harmonization, it's evident that the region continues to forge its path with strong convergence towards the IMTRF and the World Health Organization. Additionally, we can observe regulatory authorities expanding their bilateral collaboration and international cooperation. In 2025, we had examples such as Brazil-Portugal, Brazil-Egypt, Brazil-Peru, and Colombia, which became an affiliate member of the IMDRF. Moving to the next slide. Thank you. Finally, last week, Anvisa released its regulatory agenda for 2026 and 2027. And I am particularly pleased that the agenda was released before this webinar, as Brazil is a trendsetter in the region. With this agenda, we can anticipate what's come not only in Brazil, but also in other countries that are likely to follow these changes. The agenda covers many topics, but I have highlighted a few that are especially interesting. The first one is the classification of borderline products. Currently, this type of product in Brazil is classified through an individual request to Anvisa, and applicants may experience a delay in receiving a response. With this new classification system, we hope that decisions are expected to be made more quickly. The second one is the determination of the validity of the GMP certificate linked to the validity of the product registration. Another topic that is relevant is the sanitary control of combination devices. We also can highlight the public availability of the UDI database by Anvisa, and the mandatory participation of international manufacturers in the MDSAP program. We can also highlight the regulation of the medical device innovation, and another one is the regulation of prior analysis for IVDs. Just to provide some context regarding this topic, Certain products, such as kits for detection of COVID-19, Zika, and dengue, must be previously analyzed by an Anvisa-affiliated laboratory for registration to be granted. This is a current practice provided in RDC 830 from 2023, but it has not been fully regulated. And now this regulation is something, it's about to come, and it's something that IVD registration holders have been eagerly awaiting. And the last topic of this agenda is the revision of the regulation on softwares as medical devices, the RDC 657 from 2022. And here I hope this will include, among other things, information on AI, ML-based devices. And moving to the next slide. Here are some of the most important alerts we had in 2025. Argentina published MAT provision 6425 regarding product registration, which incorporated GMC resolution 2521 into the national legislation and repealed provision 2318 from 2002. And COFEPRIS published an official standard on good manufacturing practice. This standard was published in April, but entered into force on November 30. The Cuba Regulatory Authority, SECMED, published a new document outlining requirements for the regulation of manufacturers and the registration of medical software. This document repealed the Resolution 20. And Brazil has been moving forward with the implementation of UDI. Since July of this year, manufacturers of Class 4 products are required to place the UDI on labels. And this regulatory agenda for the next 2 years includes an item on making the UDI database publicly available. Mexico issued in July a guideline on the application of abbreviated regulatory reliance for medical device registration. The authorities include in the agreement are PMDA from Japan, Health Canada, the US FDA, and the IMDRF member countries, as well as the MTSAP for GMP certification. And Cuba also published the regulation E13225, which establishes TechMed policy for the regulation of medical devices. In Chile, there were two very relevant updates: the publication of a guideline for GMP certification and a technical standard on patient safety through the implementation of a medical device traceability system from manufacturing to implantation and the end user. And the last one, it was also a year of change for Honduras with the implementation of post-market surveillance regulation. Agreement number 0185 ARSA 2025 establishes a modern technovigilance system in Honduras, transforming medical device surveillance into a continuous, coordinated, and risk-based process. So just wrap up, it was a year of progress for the region, and we hope that 2026 will be a continuation of this, with Latin American countries continuing to pursue best regulatory practice that will bring the best of medical device technology to the population. And that's all from my side. Now I hand over to Baraa Nofal, talking about Middle East and Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from my time. So today we will go through the major updates in MEA region. There is a lot of updates, but I will focus on one or 5 or 4 countries. I will start with Oman. Oman recently they published finally, or they announced finally they implemented the mandatory registration requirements by publishing the official high-risk medical devices as a Class D, or moderate to high-risk medical devices, which refer to Class C, and other classification refer to this risk classification. So by the end of that year, Oman, they officially announced that. So all the manufacturer or foreign manufacturer, they are interested to register in Oman. Now they can refer to see all the required documentation. These two guidelines, they were in a draft version in the mid of 2025, and recently, 11 of December 2025, they come to be in effect. In addition to these two laws as well, Oman, they also published manufacturer registration guideline. I already added in the next slide, so you can as well refer to the registration of manufacturer requirements that officially announced. In another country as South Africa, and I think if I will name 2025 updates in our region, it will go to South Africa. There are a lot of amazing updates, and South Africa, they are working in great effort in order to give us the final versions of the required registration. But till now, SAFARA still not announced or not implemented the registration requirements to registering medical devices in South Africa. The normal process is still the same, that requiring the foreign manufacturer to have an establishment license for their importer in order to import their product. And in the process of the establishment license, you will need to list the product with that license in order in the importation to have it licensed or to be approved for importation, except for the Class A non-active or non-measurable medical devices. So the only classification that exempted from the establishment license in South Africa still are the Class A, non-active or non-measurable. And this is not an update from 2025, but is still in the process, and we are expecting to have the final result from the voluntary feasibility study that started previously from 2024. So the authority recently announced that they are still in the phase of studying this voluntary feasibility study. In order, by the end of the study, they will publish what are the official registration requirements, and they will update all their guidelines. And there are a bunch of draft guidelines. If you will click on the link that I highlighted, voluntary feasibility study, you will have the access for the draft guideline that they will be implemented, or I think they will publish the new version from this draft during 2026 to follow what are the required documentation to be followed. In the same year as well, recently, the authority published a medical devices reliance guideline, and this is the way that South Africa, they are working on it to give the foreign manufacturer easy way as well to register their products in the future in South Africa by following the reference countries. But this guideline is still in the draft, not implemented. It was open for public comments that was ended by December 5 of 2025. So for sure, early next year, we might find out that the published or the final version of the reliance guideline will be published officially. Going next to the Saudi Arabia, during this year, Saudi Arabia, they published a bunch of regulatory updates, but I cannot say they changed what exactly the current process. The current process is still the same. They just improving their regulatory guidelines with enhancing or giving better understanding for any process. But recently, the Saudi FDA has opened a public consultation on a new guidance documented titled as Criteria for Medical Devices Bundling with a Single MEDMA Application. And I need to highlight that this was an Annex 15 from the MDS Rec 1, and MDS Rec 1 is the official guideline that you will find out all the technical documentation or the requirement that you need to follow once you need to register medical devices in Saudi Arabia. So the Saudi FDA now, they are removing Annex 15 to be kept in that guideline, and they updated with a separate guideline. And you can access the link that I attach. And if you have any comment or enhancement comment for the Saudi FDA to be added in this regulation, you can easily add your comment comments from the link I already attached. As well, there was a draft guideline already published during 2025, still not came to an effect, expected to be approved by 2026, which is talking about combination products classification and registration. And just a comment for the previous criteria guideline, the timeline to submit your comments by January 11, 2026. So if you have any comments, feel free to submit it to the authority. Going next to Egypt. Actually, Egypt, I stated a small sentence, but they published a lot of guidelines, but most of the guidelines are focusing on the importation, and they published as well as samples, importation for the samples that were required for the registration, and they are enhancing the process of the importation, and they also publishing forms for the clinical trials and these kind of updates. If you look at the guidelines or the alerts, they might be having a lot of information, but once you will start reading the information from Egypt updates, you might understand, okay, they just enhancing or developing the process, not too much major information changed. And also they published separate guidelines just explaining the case, how to submit the quality certificates from reference countries similar to US FDA and from EU. These guidelines I already attached in the next slides. Lastly is Botswana. Botswana, from our last webinar we conducted during July, there is no major update, but as a reminder that you need to make sure that the mandatory registration will begin from April 2026 for Class B and October 26 for Class A, and Class C and D from June 2026. So you need to keep these dates in your mind, because after these dates you cannot import medical devices into Botswana without having these devices to be registered. Moving to the next slide. I listed down a huge list for the major regulatory updates. I will not read all of them, but I will just give it to you as a reference. So if we can, from this, for example, list, I can say Tunisia, we didn't mention it in our previous highlights, that they just, one of the major, they changed the portal of the agency. So from that link, you can understand, okay, what is the official agency? And I need to highlight something. If you try to open it and it is not accessible from your side, I'm sorry about that, but it might not be working without VPN, or maybe you need to use it from Tunisia, unfortunately. So moving to the next slide. Also here, I listed down all the important regulatory updates. As I said, South Africa, they listed a huge amount of regulatory updates, and all of them, they having a lot of major data that we need to be aware of it. So you can check it and have a deep diver information. And if you have any specific information, you can send it to us to answer it. Moving to the next slide. I think here I added also Algeria, Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Algeria, if I can refer, they published a new guideline about the clinical studies, and this guideline is for both for pharma and medical devices, and having a great insight about how to conduct the clinical trials, what is the process, and all the information that you need to be aware about it once you need to conduct a clinical trials in Algeria. And for other documents is about the pharmacovigilance, is also having data. It's applicable for pharma and medical devices, but having data as well to be aware of it for medical devices. For Kenya, they already published a guideline on submission of documentation for compensation use, authorization of health products and technologies, and that also technology, when we are talking about technologies in Kenya, we are referring to medical devices. Nigeria, they are publishing adverse event reporting guideline for medical devices and in vitro. Pakistan, they are revising their regulatory fees. They updated the timeline and fees. And Egypt, you can refer to these regulatory updates by yourself. And moving to the next slide, I think we will have also Egypt. So you can check it carefully. And moving to the next slide. Oman and Turkey, all of these this update from MEA region. Feel free if you have any question to tell us about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your updates. So, in summary, you can see that there is a significant amount of regulatory updates going on globally. This is a small subset of all of the alerts and the regulatory intelligence that my team has identified throughout the year. As a medical device IVD or pharmaceutical manufacturer, you are required by the regulation to monitor changes to regulations in any market that you sell your product. It is an overwhelming task, especially for companies that maybe do not have a staff that is able to only do this job. It is a full-time job. It's a full-time job for my team. I have many people. My staff is large, and every day, all day, as I mentioned, we monitor these changes. We're reading the legislation so that we can update our platform and provide all of that to our clients. Not only do you need to understand what is changing, but then as a manufacturer, you need to do an assessment for your own organization to say, okay, this modification is being made by the regulatory health authority. How does this impact our business? And in some cases, from the updates that you've seen, it's a positive change. We have regulatory authorities who are now trying to streamline regulatory approval processes if you have approval in other major markets. So that's something, if you're not aware of, maybe you wouldn't take advantage of it. It will allow you to get your products on the market sooner. So I encourage you to ensure within your organizations that you have a robust process for monitoring regulations, whether you use a third party like RegDesk who offers that service to you, or you develop an extensive process internally. That's a decision that you need to make. But it is absolutely obligatory for you to understand, as I mentioned, in every market where you sell your products, that you know what is changing, what's being updated, and do an impact assessment. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Gay, who is going to walk through any questions that we received, and we'll try to field those as best we can in the remaining time that we have left.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of questions come in, and I've seen our panelists have been going through for their region-specific ones and answering some of those as we've gone along, but we do have some additional ones. One of the first ones, how are reliance-based review pathways evolving across regions, and when should manufacturers leverage them?
Thank you, Gay. I'll take that one. So as I mentioned, a lot of markets are now seeing the benefit of being able to get medical devices to their clinicians faster by trusting the approval process in other markets. Many times, if you have approval or clearance in a major market like the US or EU or Canada, you can leverage that now in a streamlined process. In terms of when you should take advantage of it from a commercial perspective, as soon as you can. If you have those approvals in place and you can work through a more streamlined regulatory approval workflow in a non-major market, there's no downside in doing so. It typically decreases the amount of documentation that you have to provide, and it also provides for a faster turnaround time for approvals.
All right. Another one is, what should manufacturers prioritize to prepare for mandatory UTMED modules that are coming out in 2026?
For UTMED, as Apurva mentioned earlier, we are going to do a deep dive in January for UTMED, bringing in a notified body, DQS, to kind of help through some of these details. So I won't take too much time today, other than to say you need to understand what each of those modules are for. and what your obligations as a manufacturer are for. I think one of the most time-intensive things that you'll each need to be prepared for is just understanding what the metadata is that you need to provide within the portal for UDAMED, and ensuring that you have that collected for all of your products. There are tools like RegDesk that will help you collect and store that metadata to make it easier not only to create this initial initial submission for UDAMED, but also maintain it over time. So you'll need to determine within your organization, again, how you're going to best manage all of that information through the product life cycle.
Yeah, and we will be sending out the link for registration for that UDAMED webinar that will be coming up in the beginning of January. So be on the lookout for that. We do have a couple more questions. How can manufacturers align cybersecurity and software compliance across the US, UK, and EU?
I think this is certainly the challenge of especially 2025 and 2026, the introduction of AI coming on board, a lot more countries and regulatory authorities developing guidances and requirements specific to cybersecurity. It is a very dynamic environment right now. So the first step is understanding the requirements country to country and being able to ideally create a harmonized approach for how you're addressing cybersecurity within your organization. It's important that this is understood at the beginning of the process. You don't want to go through and develop a new product that has a cybersecurity risk and realize that you have not adequately addressed a requirement that may be required in a market that you intend to sell. So it's important for you to have within your own organization somebody who is becoming, or a group of people who are subject matter experts in terms of cybersecurity, that they're able to digest all of the new guidance and legislation coming out and determining what that means for your products and how you're going to address them. Not addressing or understanding all of that in the beginning is going to unfortunately cause you problems and maybe delays in approvals, or delays in your ability to market in certain places.
Okay, and I think just a couple more coming in. We did have, like I said, we had some of our panelists answer your questions. If you do have any additional questions of those, please let us know. If we don't get to anything by the end of the day, we will absolutely go through and share that with you when we share the replay and slide deck. And then there's a, let's see, the next one. What challenges do companies face with expanding UDI and traceability requirements globally?
I think that also, it's similar to cybersecurity. It's like when these requirements come online, especially in a major market, many other regulatory authorities follow along. Ideally, everyone would be doing it in a harmonized way. That's not always the case. So you have to thoroughly understand the UDI requirements in each market as they publish their legislative updates, so that you can create a harmonized approach. Again, you also need a repository, a source of truth for the data and the information that's going to be needed to do these updates within each of the country's tools for UDI and traceability. You have to have defined processes for managing that over time. So I think all of these electronic portals and things that regulatory authorities are implementing requires you to develop internal systems and policies to be able to comply with them over time.
All right, another question is, how should manufacturers manage regulatory uncertainty in emerging and transitioning markets?
I think awareness is the first key thing in terms of managing that uncertainty. If you are not keeping apprised and in tune with the regulatory changes that are happening globally. You may have a critical change that's occurring that you don't find out about until the last minute, which could, depending on the change, take products that you're currently providing to clinicians for patients and you not being able to sell to them because you haven't updated a registration, or you haven't filed a now compulsory registration in time to get approval, and you've basically been shut out of the market. So I think that awareness and having the ability to monitor the changes in the regulatory environment over time is really critical. I think there's many ways to do that. Certainly, each health authority is providing information in their own ways, whether that's through their websites, even on LinkedIn or other industry support groups, things of that nature. Information is coming from so many places at one time. You need to be sure that you are aware and collecting that information in real time so you can do your assessment on what that means for your organization, what steps do you need to take, and when.
All right, thanks for answering all those. That does wrap up all the questions. Again, it worked out perfect having all of our panelists being able to answer them too. So hopefully we've gotten to all of your questions today. If you have any other ones, just please let us know and we'll be happy to help you out with those. And then as a reminder, we will send out the slide deck and the recording by the end of the week. So be on the lookout from that for me. And then thanks again for you guys coming here and helping us today. Jodi, want to say special thanks to you for going through everything. And then Apurva, Kartika, Baraa, and Claudia, you've provided such valuable information. I know there's more than you could cover on all of your slides. So I know that slide deck will be super useful for everybody. And thanks again for everybody that's attended as well.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.